I was stationed at Hill Air Force Base in Utah in 1971. I was assigned to the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, 8th TFW, as a crew chief. My crew was assigned to the 26th Tactical Reconnaissance Wing. I was with the 26th TFW at Ubon RTAFB in Thailand in '72. My crew chief station was with the 8th in Thailand. While the 8th TFW in Utah, I saw a few strange things, both while in Utah and Thailand. While at Utah, I saw and heard a sighting in the desert. When I was a crew chief at Ubon, I had an experience. This occurred at night. You can refer to the story. I'm currently 74 years old, and my name is Harold. I'm a veteran of 2 wars. I write to you in good faith. I hope you will share my story. The one from Utah, I would not have written to you except for the sighting that I saw in the desert. This is the one that got me. I was in Utah for about 9 months. We're there. I was assigned to maintenance of an F-40 Phantom jet. One workday morning in October of '71, I was on a work call to fix a malfunction of the F-4D jet. I had a tool bag over my shoulder, wearing coveralls and on my way to the jet. I had to go to some way to get to the hangar of the jet. I went to the clearing, and the jet was in the desert. I had to go around to the front of the aircraft. Now, the location of the desert is flat, with some scrub brushes and cactus. I walked out on the outside perimeter of the jet wash. When I got to the front of the jet and began work, I was working for maybe about 2 hours fixing it. After what felt like 2.5 hours, I stood up and noticed that there was a large dog about 50 feet away from me. It was sitting on top of a hill and looked more like a large, scraggly coyote. But there was something different. I kept telling myself it's nothing to worry about. It stood up on its back legs, and immediately, I knew this was not a simple dog. The way it stared at me, and it moved in the direction of where I was standing. So I took off my pack, dropped my tool bag, and slowly backed away from the jet. I slowly began to panic. I moved to the rear of the jet, and then I ran to the front. I got to the end, turned around, didn't see it anymore, and started to run. I don't think I got more than 30 feet, and that's when the thing started to run after me. I took off running, ran up the hill away from the jet. So I took off going down the hill and got to the scrub brush. I was running and I was in such a hurry, I began to lose my balance. I got through the brush, got through it, and got through the cactus. When I went through the cactus, I ran over to the water tank. I got to the gate at the end of the water tank, flinging open the gate, banging against the wall. After I got it open, I ran into the first main building, going to the bathroom. Things were quiet. Nobody was in there at that time. I took a deep breath and let it out. I tried to catch my breath again, went to go look in the mirror and kept trying to convince myself I was okay. But I noticed my eyes and face were bleeding. I looked at my hands. They too were bleeding. I took a paper towel, wiping my face and hands, and started to feel very dizzy and disorientated. I felt sick. I went out to the hallway, leaned up against the wall, and began vomiting. 2 of my buddies came out and wondered if I was okay. They looked at me and saw that it was bleeding. They began to show great concern for my ailments and wondered what was wrong with me. I told them I'm not sure, that I started feeling sick. And by the way, the blood that was coming out of my hands was almost coming out of my pores. I had no visible cuts or flesh wounds on my hands or face, and yet I was just bleeding. Anyway, long story short, they weren't really sure what to do with me. They sat me down on a stool, had me calm down for a while and clean me up, and eventually, I had to go speak to my chief, who was far down the hallway. He'd asked what happened to me, and I told him I fell. He didn't believe me. I told him I slipped and fell in the sand, and he asked me what I was doing to slip and fall. Well, I explained to him that I dropped something, and so we kind of bickered back and forth for an hour or so, something along those lines. Explained to him that I was fixing the malfunction. I knew if I told him about what I saw, there's no way he would believe me. Either that, or he would put me on leave. I could not risk that. I could not risk my military career at the time. After more bantering and back and forth, he sent me off. For the rest of the day, I went to my bunk, got some alcohol, and cleaned my face up even more. At that point, around 9 p.m. that night, I noticed I had deep wounds all over my hands and face, unlike where I did not before. I'm talking deep cut wounds, which I have no idea how I got. I never landed in the cactus, and I never did touch or do anything that would cause me to have these wounds. For the next few days afterwards, I would get these random bouts of nausea and feel very sick and dizzy. I almost wonder if that coyote, or what I believe now is a skinwalker, did something to me. I've told a couple native friends of this as time went on. They believe, and I mean firmly believe, that I was marked by a skinwalker. I'd love to know your opinions on this and if you think this is indeed truth. My girlfriend at the time is the only person I told for a long time. She did not believe me and claimed that what I saw was impossible. The only thing I know for sure is the desert does not welcome strangers. I'm a disabled veteran that has seen more than a few paranormal things during a childhood with memories I do not wish to share with anyone. I also never told my parents when they were alive because I probably would have been locked up in the loony bin. My parents probably think I'm a liar for this. I'll just say that I've been to the Skinwalker Ranch, although my encounters happened in New Mexico. I've had several personal experiences with what I believe were Dogman. Some were very close. I also grew up in the woods and knew most of the different types of coyotes. The ones I saw had different builds. They always walked or trotted on 2 feet with ape-like motions. I realize now that those were probably skinwalkers or shapeshifters. As a kid, I played in the shadows of the cliffs where they were known to climb, and back then, it was just considered folklore. I know how different and demented it sounds, but these beings exist. And if somebody were to go to the Apache land in New Mexico, to the cliffs where I've seen them, you would probably never be found again. I have heard their screams years after years. They are not your typical feral creature. They are much larger, much more intelligent, and far more dangerous than we can ever imagine. Stand your ground. Thank you. I was living in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and worked at a major retail chain for about 2 years. I lived about an hour away, so I lived in a little house in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. The house, my mom lives there now, is less than 10 miles from the power plant. After I worked at the major retail chain, the power plant is where I'd work. I'd leave at 5 a.m. and be at work by 5:30. I'd commute this way for well over a year, and sometimes in the dark. I'm not sure, but I think I actually saw a skinwalker once. I remember thinking that what I saw was weird and creepy and felt like I was being watched, which is strange because I didn't live in any near neighborhood. I'm sure it was weird because it was right by a major power plant. I've seen coyotes and mountain lions out there too, so I don't know what I saw. But I was on my way to work when it felt like something was watching me. After looking in my rear view, and instead of there being a car behind me, there was this person standing in the middle of the road in the dark. The headlights hit it just right, so I could not tell it wasn't a person. It was grayish white and skinny, but not like a person wasted away. It was standing straight up, and it was easily 7 or 8 feet tall, if not more. It had no hair, and its face looked like a cross between a wolf or a coyote and a person. I don't remember seeing ears. I know that probably doesn't help you much, but I thought I'd just figure to let you know that this has been going on out here. I also wanted to say that I kept driving, even though it creeped me out so much that I was shaking. I went to work, talked to my boss, who actually used to live out there himself. He claims that it was probably a skinwalker too. He told me to not let it bother me, and even though they are dangerous, if you protect yourself properly, they can be harmless. Just do your best to ignore them, and don't speak of them, and you'll be fine. I was at a place called the Dirty Devil River, located near the Amarillo Geyser. I was camping where I always do. the last mile to the geyser. I had flown over and brought my hiking pack with me. I hiked in a whole mile, setting up my tent in the same spot that I always do. A nice flat spot that takes roughly 15 to 20 minutes to get to. The next morning, I got out at daybreak and saw this wolf jumping up and running off. After that, I heard a scream like nothing I've ever heard in my life, nor have I heard since. This seemed to be coming from inside of a canyon to the north, but I thought it was a bull elk getting killed in the canyon because it was so loud in volume. It was the most horrifying noise I've ever heard. I had my eyes on the canyon for about 15 seconds when I heard and saw a large object hit the ground. This object I judged to be about the size of a Volkswagen Bug, and it flew up in the air about 40 feet from the canyon floor and came down about 20 feet from the canyon rim. The object was as large as I said, and it looked like a VW Bug, but it was covered in hair and was the color of silver. Colors might look a little bit different in the sunlight. I would say the color, though, was most likely silver. The hair was probably estimated to be about 2 inches long, but it flew an estimated 100 feet and probably was heavier than a car. I hope you can find somebody that knows how to figure out how to measure that distance, and maybe you could figure out what flew over my tent. I was scared. I don't believe in Bigfoot, but I know for a fact Bigfoots are not that big and they do not fly. Afterwards, I went about my regular routine, made breakfast, and then went to the geyser to get some water. I guess the creature went to the canyon over because I did not see it, although I heard screaming and yelling like I never heard before. I think I was hearing a pack of these creatures screaming, but I'm not sure. They kept yelling until they all moved off. I heard them moving down the canyon, moving off over the next ridge and up a canyon to the east. I did not follow. I wanted nothing to do with them. They scared the heck out of me, and I was alone. I camped there for another night. The next day, I went into the canyon where it came from, looked around but did not find or see anything. I didn't look around very well because I did not want to spend the time. It was eerie. I also did not see any tracks, but I could see some indentation of large gargoyle-like feet where this object or thing had hit the ground. It was about the size of 19 inches long, roughly, and maybe 9 or 10 inches wide. I should have made a casting, but I did not have the proper equipment with me. I just wanted to make sure that I was not hallucinating or anything, but I guess I wasn't. The creature that I saw, which I'll try and describe as best I can, looked like a giant bat, or something along those lines. Easily as big as a car, as I've already stated, but ultimately, due to the lighting, it was more of a silhouette than anything, and looked more like a large blob of an object, slightly resembling that of a bat or some sort of person. It's hard to exactly make out what it was, but whatever it was, I have a feeling it was either alien or supernatural. I'm pretty sure that what I had encountered that evening was a Skinwalker. I was in my former home and state, now living in a new town. It was about 2 years ago, at around 2 a.m. The only people inside were me, my girlfriend, and her young son. My girlfriend went downstairs to use the bathroom, and I stayed up to watch YouTube and play video games on my PS3. While doing so, I was playing rhythm games on the Vita, but I had my headphones connected to the PS3. I presumed that my girlfriend was up on the main floor because I heard her talking to me, but when I replied, nothing had happened. Thinking that I misheard her, I said her name repeatedly but got no response. I tried Skyping and texting her, but nothing. And then for some reason, I picked up the phone and called her. I heard it ringing, and she was now downstairs, and was in fact using the bathroom when I called. I ran downstairs and asked her if she had called me, and she said that she had been in the bathroom the entire time. I told her what had happened, and she said that she probably heard me playing and thought I was talking to her. I've never been more confused and scared in my life. It could have been that I was hearing things, but I don't think so. She is my girlfriend, and I know her voice extremely well. It wasn't her. This happened a couple of years ago, and I still think about it. And now, tonight, around 2 a.m., I was watching a video on YouTube and laughing with my girlfriend on the phone. When I paused the video, I heard a very low voice say, "I'm here." I paused the video and told my girlfriend that I just heard a voice say something. She acted very concerned, asked me to send her the playback. So I did, and nothing was there. I played it again, and this time, I heard the voice less clearly. Then, I paused the video again, replayed it, and there it was. "I'm here." I didn't send the playback to my girlfriend before pausing the video because I wanted her to experience it for herself. This was not my imagination. I know what I heard. I just don't know what it was. Something is imitating the voice. I'm sorry if this story is confusing. I have a hard time writing it down. Hopefully you can make sense of it. I'm not sure if you know about the Skinwalker stuff that goes on down here in Southern California, but I've heard a few people who've experienced it. And as somebody who knows these three people, I know they do not want to discuss it really. So I'll kind of tell you what I know. One guy I know, he worked at a movie theater, and he said one night they were getting ready to close up. And by the way, this was many, many years ago. He observed the big projector room door being slammed and kicked repeatedly from the inside of the room. Thought it was a poltergeist. It sounded like whatever was in there was very aggressive and angry. He said some other people working there thought that his coworker was in there. Then he heard a voice coming from inside, calling his name, but in this thunderous, deep, raspy voice. He said he was terrified, and at some point saw a shadow person with a human-shaped outline, very black but no discernible facial features, again, looking like the shadow of a human at the end of the door, standing there, trying to get him to come in. Terrified, he had also heard a high-pitched scream and a low, deep moan at the same time coming from the room. He's not exactly sure what that's about. Now, the rabbit hole gets a little bit deeper. Come to find out that whole area of town, I won't say which, where the movie theater was built, and several other small businesses apparently have a host of paranormal and strange activity, right? Well, come to find out that they were all built on native cursed land. The only verification I have for that is a couple of Apache friends who do not know each other, but they both say the same thing about that section of land, and I've also heard stories from other small business owners in that area claiming to see strange things. Shapeshifters, dark shadows, strange noises, all sorts of strange sensations and experiences as well. All of them unexplainable, and ultimately, paranormal in nature. Apparently, from what I know, a dark native entity or spirit had attached itself to that movie theater. As cheesy as that sounds, its sole purpose is to do harm and enact revenge, or so I'm told. And then another guy I know claims that he'd seen a raccoon shapeshift into a feral-looking man. This was also at night, outside his house, when he claims he saw a larger-than-life raccoon that looked a little more shaggy and unkempt than usual go behind one of his woodsheds, and a few minutes later, a large feral man came out from behind, running off into the distance. He's not exactly sure how to explain it, but also believes that it was a skinwalker. And lastly, my third friend, she claims that she was driving down, right near the border of Nevada, when late at night, she was chased in her car by a coyote of massive size. She said its size almost rivaled that of a horse, and she's not lying. When she told me this story, her eyes began to welt up, and you could see the tears building up. She was terrified, even retelling her experience. She said this massive coyote was keeping up with her car with little effort, even though she was doing at least 75 or 80, and it almost rammed into her car. It would come up to her driver's side door and look at her right in the eye. She said its eyes were very human, and it looked very, very evil. The experience scared her very, very badly, and even now, she has frequent nightmares all throughout the night from this one incident that took place many years ago. There's obviously something going on down here in Southern California, and whatever it is, I believe it's evil. I was what you would consider our family's nomad when I was a child. My parents were migrant workers. However, Instead of being taken along with them on their work sites, I always tagged along with my father. Both of us would be gone for weeks at a time. One of the places we would go was West Texas and the Chihuahuan Desert. In fact, we were there so often that I got to know the area pretty well. As I got a little older, I learned more about the paranormal world and began remembering my encounters with paranormal entities. I even remember seeing a dark humanoid figure on two legs standing on the side of the road, almost kind of like a cowboy. When I was a little girl, I remember that getting out to use the restroom was a big ordeal. We had to go really far back into the desert to find a spot of relative safety. Often, we would end up going on the side of the interstate. I also remember something coming up to the van that we were once in and looked like a tall black dog, but it was much bigger. It was also incredibly fast and scary looking. My father can remember something that looked like a child, but it walked on two legs and looked very animalistic. I also remember another separate black wolf-like creature, or kind of like a coyote, or a mix of the two. Maybe it was a black coyote, but it had green emerald eyes. I'm not sure if it was before or after the other entity, but I remember it was kind of metallic looking. I also remember that sometimes we'd be out in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and I would just get this deep sense of dread come over me. This primal innate fear that would come out of nowhere. And it was so very bad, it would give me frequent anxiety attacks. It's always stayed with me to this day. That was the last time I ever visited the desert, and much to my regret. I don't really like being in urban areas either though, because there are times that I still get this uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach and like I'm being watched. I can't help but wonder and think that those same beings are following me around no matter where I go, and that I will always be watched. Like they are disguising themselves, waiting for the right opportunity to come out and show themselves, to shapeshift and to hide. I was raised in southern Utah, and when I was growing up, we'd often hear stories of skinwalkers. I was in my early 20s when my wife and I experienced something that can only be explained as a skinwalker. We were driving back from a late night in the city of St. George, around 11:30 p.m. We were going north on I-15 when we passed a big field on our right. Something caught my attention in my rearview mirror. It was a pair of yellow glowing eyes. These things were about 20 feet off the road, and multiples of them standing in the middle of the field in the pitch black darkness. They were huge, bright yellow, like a cat's eyes, but they were bigger and more human-like. I immediately thought of a skinwalker and slowed down to see if I could see whatever it was again. My wife began screaming, and she was staring at the passenger window. There was more of them. They were moving towards our car. Huge humanoid figures in the night. I stepped on the gas to get out of there quickly. I've only told a few people about this, and even fewer are actual believers. I have had several encounters and have seen a skinwalker. I have also seen and heard a very large wolf. I believe that these are now the same creature. I have had many encounters, but it only shows itself when I'm alone. I have heard it many times and have also smelt it, the smell of sickly rotting flesh. In south central Utah, I was driving home after dark. I was rounding a curve on the highway and had to slow down to about 20 miles an hour as to not hit a deer that was standing near the middle of the road. I was about 30 yards from the animal when it stood up on its back legs and howled at me. It was a very loud howl, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once. I could see the animal in my headlights, but only for a second. It was all black, standing on its hind legs like a man. The creature was at least 7 feet tall, very muscular, not at all like a bear. It had a wolf-like head and stood on its hind legs like a man. I estimated to weigh at least 400 pounds. I drove the rest of the way home in a panic, fearing that it would follow me or want to come out of the woods on either side of the highway. I was even afraid to stop, even when I got close to my house. I just kept going. I worried that if I stopped now at my home, it would know where I live. So in my head, it was still following me and I had to lose it. Eventually, I drove around for about another hour and a half, and made it home safely, but just a lot of fast maneuvering. I have had several other encounters with this creature. It seems to know when I'm alone, and only shows itself. It seems to like to scare me. I always smell it first, and sometimes will hear it howling in the distance. I've even heard it near my home, and I've also heard it while camping in the mountains. I've seen it near the road, walking through sagebrush, and I've also seen it in the woods following me and my friend. I've seen other animals acting strangely, and I know they're around. The roars kind of sound like that of a large cat, but much deeper and guttural. I've seen large prints while hiking in the area, but I've never seen the actual creature, at least not up close. I've heard it though. It seems as though there are different variations of the creature. I've also heard the sounds of other unknown animals that all have this very supernatural feel to them. I'm not exactly sure what's out there. The area is full of rock outcroppings and cliffs. I'm convinced there are several tribes of these creatures. I just hope that I'm not forced to confront the creature that I know exists. I have no doubt that I would lose it.